wagons followed cattle drive. There was hooting, there was yelling, there was dust in the air, with the yip of the driver and the cry of outriders and the roar of wheels on the ground. With muscles twitching and broomtails flying, with canvas flapping and footstools clanging, the Chuckwagon race is here. In the hills around Calgary and on the rugged plain, where gopher holes and rocks dot the way, with the green grass waving in the whistling wind, as the Chuckwagon jolted on and on, as the Chuckwagon jolted on and on.
It bothers the devil out of me to have to sit back and watch my son Bob driving. I'd sooner be out there driving myself. But these kids are just practically raised to it in Alberta here. And my grandson, little Richard, won't be too long before he gets old enough, and he'll be another driver a-coming. He'll make a good living out of it. Chuckwagon races are going all over Canada now. 3 or 4 big shows in the States. Some of the boys are making 15,000, 20,000 out of their outfits, so it's big business now. The boys usually start, about the 1st of April, kind of breaking their team and working them and getting them hard, just like anybody at the racetrack would do. And then they'll start driving them slow and turning the barrels and getting them to work together. Other stampedes and rodeos have tried to copy it, but it's never really been successfully put on anywhere else but Calgary. And I don't think it will. Most of the drivers live within 200 miles of here, and this is their home, and the Chuckwagon race is their race.
Many people do come from all parts of the world to Calgary this time of year, where once only hard-riding cowboys did roam. Everyone comes to see the stampede. Now the people in Calgary all lend a hand to put on the best show in the West, and the old-timers tell you it's better each year, as it tells of a life that is past. Wild horses and Indians, wild Brahma bulls are part of the show you will see. There are calf ropers, bulldoggers, bronc riders too, till the Chuckwagon races are run.
After the dust has settled down from the afternoon show, about an hour before sundown, is when we run off the wagon races. Most of the boys will drive 2 wagons every night, and the outriders, they might ride for 3 or 4 different outfits. We run 7 or 8 heats every night, or wagons to heat. They get their time all tallied up, and by the end of the week, the fastest average time wins. A few seconds, one way or the other, sure means a lot, and I can tell you, I've won this race myself by 1/5 of a second, and I've lost it by 1/5 of a second, so you can see how it can go.
you. Set it up and
Wild west of Canada in days gone by, when chuck wagons followed cattle dry. There was hooting, there was yelling, there was dust in the air, with the yip of the driver and the cry of old riders and the roar of wheels on the ground. With muscles twitching and broomtails flying, with canvas flapping and footstoves clanging, the chuck wagon race is here. In the hills around Calgary and on the rugged plain, where
oh yes it is.
rocks dot the way, with the green grass waving in the whistling wind, as the chuck wagon jolted on and on, as the chuck wagon jolted on and on.
It bothers the devil out of me to have to sit back and watch my son Bob driving. I'd sooner be out there driving myself. But these kids are just practically raised to it in Alberta here. And my grandson, little Richard, won't be too long before he gets old. And
Little
there'll
Richie.
be another driver coming. He'll make a good living out of it. Chuck wagon races are going all over Canada now. 3 or 4 big shows in the States. Some of the boys are making 15, 20,000 out of their outfits, so it's big business.
Yeah.
The boys usually start, about the 1st of April, kind of breaking their team and working them and getting them hard, just like anybody at the racetrack would do. And then they'll start driving them
Oh,
slow
as
and
a
turning
cook.
the barrels and
Yeah.
getting them to work together.
Stiff as a cook. Stiff.
Other stampedes and rodeos have tried to copy it, but it's never really been successfully put on anywhere else but Calgary. And I don't think it will. Most of the drivers live within 200 miles of here, and this is their home, and the chuck wagon race is their race.
Many people do
Yeehaw.
parts of the world to Calgary this time of year, where once
Hee
mighty cowboys did roam. Everyone comes to see
Whip
the
them cocksuckers. Cha.
Now the people in Calgary all in the hand to put on the best show in the West. And the old timers tell you it's better each year.
Yeehaw.
Tells of a life that is past.
Whip them cocksuckers.
Wild horses and Indians, wild grandma bulls are part of the show you will see. There are
Wow.
cowboys, bulldoggers, bronc riders too. Till the chuck wagon races are
Just giving her. Deadly. Oh, little whoopsie. Oh, he's got him. Oh, holy fuck.
After the
Give
dust
that guy a
settled
beer.
down from the
He,
afternoon
he
show,
landed in the beer
about
gardens.
an hour before sundown is when we run off the wagon races. Most of the boys will drive 2 wagons every night, and the outriders, they might ride for 3 or 4 different outfits. We run 7 or 8 heats every night, 4 wagons to heat. They get their time all tallied up, and by the end of the week, the fastest average time wins. A few seconds, one way or the other, sure means a lot, and I can tell you, I've won this race myself by 1/5 of a second, and I've lost it by 1/5 of a second, so you can see how it can go.
That's what I was good at, was yelling. Oh, Outrider down. He's down, boy.
I know what Bobby feels like about now. You get kind of tense and fidgety when it's coming up to your heat. The wife and kids are getting pretty excited too.
Bobby.
To get in there. You see, it's not always the first wagon across the finish line wins the race. Your outriders make a big difference to your chances. They got to get the cook stove on when the horn goes, and they got to stay right with you all the way around the track. Started this race back in 1923, well, we had old Percheron horses and the big Clydes to pull our wagons. Now the boys got mostly thoroughbreds, and they're not just broke-down horses off the racetracks either. Take those lines. Why, they're on the lead team, they're 15 foot long, and a horse has got to have a good mouth to carry that line.
Hell of a mount.
These are more streamlined now. We've tried to build it so the boy who's built the best team can win the race. We used to use steel barrels. Now we use cardboard, heavy cardboard barrels, and a wagon can hit them and not turn over or do any damage. And the same with the stoves. We used to have real cook stoves, and if they were left behind and a horse ran over it, he might get his leg cut up, that sort of thing. Bobby's on number 4, the suicide barrel tonight. I always liked that one myself. I won a lot of money off that old number 4 in my days.
Back in my day. Whip them cocksuckers.
Didn't have any trouble. He won his heat in good time tonight. Didn't see any penalties for him. Oh, I've seen some great things.
Bob Cosgrave.
Some of the greatest sights that anybody will ever see.
In the wild west of Canada, in days gone by, chuck wagons followed cattle drive. There was hooting, there was yelling, there was dust in the air, with the yip of the driver and the cry of the riders and the roar of wheels on the ground. With muscles twitching and broomtail flying, with canvas flapping and footstool clanging, the rattle of the wagon and who's making thunder, the chuck wagon race is here.
Yow. Ever deadly. I didn't even know that existed.
Okay, the morning has finally come. We are leaving for Clinton. We've been cleaning and working and packing the trailer and getting everything ready for 2 weeks. And the day is here, so we are heading to the National Championship Chuckwagon races. My mom's hauling her horse and all of our
What
panels.
in America is this?
So I've got Ryder and Rickson's buddy, Rollin. He's going to go with us today and ride Rusty's horse.
I don't
Until
think this
Rusty
is
gets there tomorrow, Rusty's going to stay and work.
chuck wagons I'm looking for.
We are loaded down. About to load up 5 horses. And
No, I don't see no chuck wagons. Get fucked. Yeah. Cheyenne.
Although Kelly Sutherland represents the modern era of chuckwagon racing, he understands the old.
I mean, in those days, those old guys, they set the barrels tough because they had really good turning outfits, and you made one mistake and you ended up on your lid. I spent till I was about the age of 21, 22 being actually really scared. Partially because I was breaking an outfit, but partially because I didn't really know where I was going, and I had enough horsepower that I knew I was going to end up somewhere. It'd be nothing to see 2 to 3 wagons upset every chuck wagon meet we went to.
It's still half the pressure it used to be because the barrels are set so much softer. Like they're way softer. If you can't drive around these now, you got some kind of trouble, you see.
Once a fine outrider, Norm Haynes is now the Calgary Stampede's head chuckwagon judge.
When it was in the old half-mile track, the barrels were set up so it was a lot sharper turns coming to the track. And now, as you'll know, we got number 1 set off a little bit, and 2, and then 3's almost coming straight onto the track, and the other one's on the track. So this has eliminated a lot of that wagon sliding and that coming to the racetrack. It's taken a lot of the danger out of it.
The old steel barrels and stoves had been dangerous, but the first night of racing on the new Calgary infield, Ron David discovered the value of a metal pole.
That was my first crack at that new Calgary track. It was July 4th, 1974, so I remember it well.
Our first race in Calgary, Ronnie David's pole broke. To give you a little idea of what I mean by a pole breaking, it'll start to snake back and forth because it's out of control. It breaks off up by the neck yoke, and then when it digs in, the horses are still hooked to your double trees at the back, therefore bringing the wagon forward, driving it out through the bottom of the floor of the wagon box. And that's where the driver's at.
When the pole dug into the ground, the wagon stopped so fast that the stove rack actually broke off one corner and swung around to the back wheel.
And it drove him at least 30 feet in the air. And I was right beside him. And I was sure missing the farm that day when that happened. I thought, what am I doing out here? Look what's happening.
I hung on to the lines. I went as high as they let me go, and then I kept going, and of course the horses broke free of the wagon. They kept going, and I was spinning a lot. I can remember the track going away from me, and I remember the track coming back to me, and then when I hit, I was out, of course, then.
Ron David suffered a broken back and pelvis, a ruptured spleen, a half-dozen broken ribs, and a punctured lung. But he was walking with crutches within a month and back competing the following year. The new softer barrel turn, collapsible barrels, metal poles, flak jackets for outriders, and keen-eyed judges all contribute to safer racing. But one of the greatest dangers to men, and especially to horses, was overlooked until it contributed to the worst accident in the history of chuckwagon racing.
The barrel.
The wreck began when a lead horse stumbled after stepping into the stove rack.
Oh, shit.
In the crash, but it was the fate of 3 horses that caused the greatest uproar, and rightly so. Something had to be done. The Calgary Stampede contacted head judge Norm Haynes and gave him full rein to design an enclosed stove rack.
You go ahead and get a wagon. We'll bring it in here and we'll put our, we've got carpenters here. We'll tear it down and put it back together, and I think it was 5 times we tore that thing down and put that back up, and finally decided that that's the way it should be.
Nice.
So everyone is happy about that.
Along with the new stove rack came a light rubber stove that could be loaded with one hand and collapsed if run over by a horse or a wagon. Other than the size and the weight of the stove, the Outriders' tasks have changed little since the races began. It's still a 4-second penalty to leave the stove, 1 for each peg or the canvas fly left dragging. Veteran Outrider Jim Nevada explains the tasks, then shows us what it's like to follow a racing chuck wagon.
Stove man goes in first and pulls the stove out, and then he backs off so the peg man can come up and get their tarp straight out. Your pegs have to be on the ground or it's a second penalty. So the idea is for both of your peg men to throw at the same time so you don't get that back and forth action. It's an even throw and straight in.
Golden. Oh fuck, I miss this shit. I miss the speed, the wind in your fucking face. When those horses catch their glide, fuck, there's no stopping, man.
Riders, horses, drivers, wagons. Come rain, come shine, dust or mud.
See that
like
again.
A postman, the chuck wagons always deliver.
AGT on the outside. Now making a move and cruising over the lead. Here they come now. Team AGT on the outside. Heading down the lane, and look at this finish we got here. Now he comes, he's taken over. Harold Plumbers, Eddie Olstad fighting.
Outriders, horses, drivers, wagons. Come rain, come shine, dust or mud. Like the postman, the chuck wagons always deliver.
In '65, it started raining, and it never quit. And the track went from a heavy mud track to a soup track with a hard bottom, and the wagons picked up speed again. When I went to jump my horse at the top barrel,
Fucking liar.
Lundquist had already mounted his horse. He was riding with us. When Orville mounted his horse crowded over again me as I went to make my jump, and it pinned me between my horse and his. That's the way he took me out onto the track. I'd already rode the horse that I was riding in one heat, so he was muddy and I was certainly muddy. And when we hit the track, normally if you just drop your feet and hit the ground, the speed of a horse running will kick you into the saddle. But that year, with the track being so deep with the mud, when I dropped to kick into the saddle, instead of me kicking off the ground sucked me in. As I went down,
The ground done sucked me off.
Off the saddle horn, and I grabbed for the stirrup and missed it. And then sat down on the lead line. The horse I was riding was a horse called Tony, and he was a hard-mouthed old devil. liked to be with the wagon. So, being that way, me being on the end of that lead line just didn't mean a thing to Tony. He carried me right along for about 100 yards. I finally lost the last knot on the lead line and slid to a stop. I picked myself up. My legs were sore where old Tony had stepped on me a little bit, but I walked over to the inside fence at the grandstand and was going to lean against it, and there was a commissioner standing there, and he decided that maybe I should be on the inside of the fence instead of on the track side. So that's where I was, standing watching the wagons come home when the Sun reporter, Randy Hill, took a picture of me.
Oh, for the life of an outrider, but they do love it, and so do their horses.
Ah, me, Sherman.
Horses like it just as well as you do. You can drive a team
Had
in the field or anywhere and set up a set of barrels, and they're just on edge. They're just as much show off as us cowboys are. They like it.
Ward Willard's great swing leaders certainly love to show off.
Here's a big raised-faced horse that was bought for $350. Bought him off Ronnie Glass, and he was a barrel hunter. He could turn a barrel so hard his shoulder would be about that far off the ground. But yeah, he turned so short the wheel team wouldn't be able to get around there. So I had this black wheel team on there that just about had the same brains God gave a sparrow. And they just charged, and they just whipped that wagon around there, and I broke every track record at every major show that there was that I went into.
Ward took swing leader and his mates all the way down to Cheyenne's famous frontier days.
Ward
One
Willard?
evening at the end of the show, Ward's crew washed the wagon too late for even the hot Wyoming sun to dry it.
I pulled out to the track and lined up. As I was pulling out there, the announcer saying to all these people down there, because of the fact I had been fortunate and
seen Jess Willard, man. That guy is a fucking beast.
And I broke the track record a few times.
If he had more money behind him, he would have been a champion.
Much credit that he was screaming about how here's the driver, here's the man, here's all this. I'm busy looking down the floor watching this water sloshing back and forth as I'm pulling up to the barrel.
Big old Jess.
Oh my God. And that guy let that, down there they use a gun instead of a claxton.
That's his son.
He let that cannon go off, them horses fired as hard as they could.
Crazy.
That water being down there so slick, I went through my bounce off, slid me right underneath the seat, and I went down into the box. And I let the lines slide because I didn't want to pull them off into my competitors, hoping they'd go straight on, but I was at the mercy of whatever them horses did. I slipping and sliding around that water and got back up in the box, and I was by now I was on the first turn. I was ahead of everybody, but I wasn't sure what had happened because I was back at the stove rack most of the time. They'd taken off so hard. Anyway, we went around the track. I watched my competitors as they went by. They're all smiling. We all nodded to each other and still don't know what's happening. As I'm going past the grandstand, that announcer says, "As I told you, ladies and gentlemen, this is the man that can drive. He's the one that's done her every year." I never even saw the race. Them horses did it all.
The modern Chuckwagon horse is a top-flight racing thoroughbred.
The reason that you like to see them run at the racetrack is you know if they have ability to run. But that has no bearing on whether they would work on the Chuckwagon or not.
Oh, I pay from $1,000 to $3,500. It just depends on the type of horse, and sometimes it's a $1,000 horse is a good one.
It doesn't have to be an expensive horse to be a good horse.
You could hook Cigar on a wagon, he might not be worth a hoot, and you know, you could go buy a $1,000 horse that can't run at the racetrack, and he might be your star.
Six-time world champion driver Kelly Sutherland had his first horse given to him by Dave Lewis in lieu of outriding wages. The skinny little 3-year-old named Chicago Mike just wouldn't settle down for trainer Bobby Marsh.
Bobby had bought this goat and put in the stall trying to settle the horse down, and he'd come out the next morning and the horse was so hyper he'd walk the goat and actually trampled the goat to death all night. He would have a path buried in a 10 by 10 stall. It was just incredible. And I wasn't too impressed, but I didn't have anything else, so I said, well, he's probably good enough for me. And once we got a lot of feed in him and got him broke, he turned out to be an incredible animal. He was a big, charging, strapping horse by the time he was 5-6 years old, and he was the one that would take me out of there on the left-hand side, and he'd actually pack a weaker right-hand leader. He charged so hard. I'd say 90% of the horses, they seem to like a position, and that means you just sort them around, kind of have a look at them, at where they seem to relax the best, where they tend to want to turn. You know, you need some charge on the left-hand side. You need a horse on the right-hand side that doesn't cheat when you're turning at the barrel.
By not cheating, Kelly means a right-hand horse waits for the driver's signal, a tug on the line, to turn.
Well, he was a right leader. He was one of them horses that, you know, like a right leader is a real important horse as far as I'm concerned, because he's the one that has to make the turn, and the rest just have to follow him, kind of, you know. But he never was in trouble. The horse never did get into trouble. We were always on the front end with him, you know. And so, I mean, when you're on the front end, it's tough for a horse to get into trouble. He's one of them special horses, I guess. Everybody seems to have one in their life. And Gopher, I bought him as a 5-year-old out of Saskatoon. They give $63,000 for him as a yearling, and he had only 3 wins when I bought him. And well, I used him up till he was 18 years old, so I got a lot of years out of him. And you know, he's still, right now, he's still running the fields at home.
George Norman never believed in pushing a young horse too hard.
A 3-year-old's nice. You know, you get a young horse, he's sound, generally sound. You get an early start, but you can't run him very hard. You might go 2 or 3 trips as a 3-year-old. Then when you turn 4, they get a little better, and then they know what they have to do time they're 5 years old, and then you've got them for 4 or 5 years, and they'll work at their best from 5 on.
George pushed himself and his young outriders a little harder. Practice makes, well, winter practice makes for awfully cold feet. When it comes to hands, though, and handling a horse, Kelly Sutherland learned to use a soft touch.
Strength's important for control, but you have to have the ability to have really soft fingers or soft hands, and those horses tend to relax, because the only communication you have with them is down the lines, and that's just like telegraph phone lines to them.
Legendary linesman Ralph Vegan was Kelly's mentor, and both Vegan and Alan Bensmiller influenced the driving style of Herman Flad. Flad explains how he handles his lines on the critical top barrel turn.
I just drive like this, and then when I get to the top, I reach over and grab this and suck him back like this, eh?
Alan Bensmiller also taught his son, Buddy.
Well, the way he taught me was to bring my wheelers up through the bottom so you got a good grip, and then you take the leaders and come back through your fingers here where they cross in your hand. This way here you've got your fingers and thumbs to re-grab on your other set of lines. He always taught me, like, when you turn the top, you got to re-grab going to the top, and as you're turning the top, you re-grab here to set up for the bottom, so you can come back in your lane. Lots of guys, you know, they have their line set, they go up, it's just one pull and one pull to the bottom. But when you're driving a lot of green horses, it's nice to be able to pick up the slack as you're turning, and then you're setting up yourself for the bottom barrel as well.
1996 Calgary Stampede champion Edgar Baptiste has developed his own unique style of folding his slack line.
This is my pull line here at the back of the
My
horse.
dad probably tell him that shit.
This is my lead line. It comes
Oh no, not him.
on top of the wheel line of the inside of my hand, and I let the ends drop down in the box.
Alan and Buddy Bensmiller,
See that again?
Baptiste and Herman Flad all began the...
And as you're turning the top, you re-grab here to set up for the bottom, so you can come back in your lane. Lots of guys, you know, they have their line set, they go up, it's just one pull and one pull to the bottom. But when you're driving a lot of green horses, it's nice to be able to pick up the slack as you're turning, and then you're setting up yourself for the bottom barrel as well.
1996 Calgary Stampede champion Edgar Baptiste has developed his own unique style of folding his slack line.
This is my pull line here at the back of the horses, and this is my lead line. It comes over on top of the wheel line of the inside of my hand, and I let the ends drop down in a box.
Alan and Buddy Bensmiller, Edgar Baptiste, and Herman Flad all began their careers driving on the Northern Chuckwagon Association circuit, and they all jumped at the opportunity to make their first trip to Calgary in 1979 to replace the striking professional drivers who had put on their own meet 30 miles to the south.
We decided we'd come out to High River and run and go head and head with Calgary. It was, you know, a lot of people thought it was a real stupid idea, and you know, maybe it was, but you know, ever since, you know, Calgary done some things different, we done some things different, and you know, now wagon racing is, you know, right at the top of its class.
George Norman had left the Northern Association the year before to join the professional ranks. His best friend Buddy Bensmiller had planned to join him, but instead took the opportunity to race at Calgary and win his first Stampede Championship.
Everybody wanted to come to Calgary. Everybody that ever dreamed of running a wagon, they still do when we hit the big one, Calgary.
The Northern Association had been running for years and developed their own Bensmiller racing dynasty. The new boys on the block quickly fit into Calgary's Western spirit, not just on the track, but downtown at the pancake breakfasts. And the Northern boys brought with them Mae Gorst, the first and only woman to ever outride at the big show. Within 3 years, the rival groups were running together in Calgary, and 10 years after the rift, Buddy Bensmiller dueled it out with aggregate champion George Norman, along with Dallas Dorchester and Richard Cosgrave in a heart-pumping $50,000 dash for cash. It was a classic race. All 4 wagons finished less than a second apart, with Buddy beating his best friend George by a mere 6-1.
Oh, George.
Well, I guess he couldn't have turned
You
out
and your
better.
creme de la creme a la
He ended up with the
Edgar.
truck and I ended up with the 50. He probably wished it would have been the other way around, but still he was happy for me, and you know, and that's what kept us close, I guess.
6 years later, Buddy was on the flip side of the coin, losing the $50,000 prize to Ward Willard by a horse's nose, 0.03 of a second. Tight finishes and a tight-knit community. There are few groups closer than the Chuckwagon racing fraternity. Few sports where the family works so hard and so closely together.
You know, not only my outfit, but I think just about every outfit, your family is. If you don't have that family atmosphere in wagon racing, you know, you ain't gonna be around very long. It's one of the, you know, the sports that really requires your whole family, like, you know, and right from your grandsons on, like, you know, they love to come and they all help.
Yeah, the whole family works. They get in and clean the barn and lead horses and brush horses and feed, and all the wives, they get in there too. It is definitely a
Iris.
The wife and the 4 kids, they all travel with me. Well, they did up till this year, and the 2 oldest now are kind of going their own ways, but they come when they can, and I always feel better when the family's with me because I don't have to worry about them at home. You know, I can concentrate more on my horses if they're with me.
I enjoy lots of people around. This is a family sport. There's lots of work back at the barns that I rely on Cindy and my family to look after. Probably if you hired it out, you probably couldn't have paid someone enough money to do it.
Everybody gets along pretty well. You have to, eh? You go from May till October there, everybody's at the same shows and everything.
To do all the work that there is involved, you got to love the horses. And then to win, you got to be competitive. And you have to have that combination to stay on top.
It's a good life. I like the horses, and you know, you have a bad run, you mope around and walk by the next guy that beat you the night before and his chest's out and he's strutting, and then you beat him the next night and he's down and you're up, and it's an up and down game.
This is a community that celebrates its heroes and sometimes must mourn them. A world full of traditions where the past is almost as important as the future, and both are tied inextricably together.
gets a guy pumped when you know your grandfather did so well and your dad and your uncle, and just makes me proud of them, I guess, and just hope I can just fill their shoes someday.
Someday.
Well, here we are again today, risking our lives for very little pay, but it's a life we'll choose and it's a life we'll live, and Lord, we don't ask anyone to give. But we want to thank you, Lord, for the many trouble-free miles that we travel each year, up and down the highways and the dusty old roads, knowing that you're near. Now, we ain't always been straight or took a religious stand, but when we crawl up on the seat of that wagon and look back at the family, there's someone we truly believe in, and you're the man. And we turn them barrels and she lifts up on two. I sometimes hear a little voice saying, "Don't worry, son, I'm in here too." In the past, you've taken a few drivers, a few outriders, even the odd child or two. But really, Lord, no one has ever blamed you. So we don't ask that you take us to heaven or never run in stormy weather. But when it's all over and you gather since your mighty kingdom come, would you please keep us all together?
Still try to outdo each other like the way they've always done. But instead of over 15 miles, today it's half of one. Around an oval racetrack where big dollars are their prize. This modern sport is a race through hell where the history still survives. From the days of the 1800s all across the prairie land, through the racetracks of the modern day, from Calgary to Cheyenne. Well,
there's a horde and the charge is underway.
The sounds of pounding hooves and a roaring crowd means the world-famous Chuckwagon races are underway at the Calgary Stampede. And while these races last for 1 week every summer, it takes a lot of time and effort year-round to prep for this competition. Todd Baptiste is from Red Pheasant First Nation in Saskatchewan. He's been driving his whole life, and this is his 5th appearance at the Stampede.
It's any driver's dream to be here. I pretty much lived here every summer as a kid, you know, and now I'm more or less the semi-veteran. There's still some veterans now, but a lot of the guys in our age group, we were all kids at one time, you know, trying to follow the dreams of our families.
Baptiste follows the footsteps of his uncle Edgar, who won numerous awards in the sport.
I believe Edgar is the very first Aboriginal driver to win the Calgary Stampede to date. As a nephew to him, it's tough to fill the gaps like that, and especially follow the footprints of somebody of any caliber, no matter what you do.
Baptiste is now passing the knowledge to his 13-year-old nephew, Jesse.
Our normal feed for our horses that we use on the track, keep them in shape, keep them healthy.
He joins the rest of his family on the sidelines, making sure the horses are good to race.
To take care of the horses, it's a lot of work we put in for these horses.
These races feature some of the best in the world. To have the ability to compete is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity.
Easy, buddy.
This is Curtis Morin's first year at the Stampede.
It's really great to be at the greatest outdoor show on earth. The grandstands are packed every single night. It's just electric out there.
From Big River First Nation, Morin says he grew up watching his dad race. Now he says he strives to be a role model for youth back home.
It's great for those children, those kids, to see someone from their community performing at the Calgary Stampede. Someone that they can look up to and say, hey, I want to be that when I grow up. We can be anything we choose to be when we grow up. Kit Kat here definitely knows it.
As a Native person, I mean, I'm more than proud to be able to be here to show my
what we have, the caliber of horses, the horsemanship, and especially, you know, the background of where we come from.
While the drivers are the stars on the track, both Morin and Baptiste say the support of their families are what keep them going to carry on their traditions. Tamara Pimentel, APTN National News, Calgary.
And Derby, everybody running for day money except for the top 4 that will roll for $50,000 winner take all. They made the barrel draw for that final heat a little earlier tonight, and wouldn't you know it, Kelly Sutherland of Grand Prairie, the 8-time champion and defending champ, is not only very good, he's lucky too. They left him the 1 barrel. Hugh Sinclair, who was first at bit of work to do before we get to that one, the 9th heat of the night. Let's go to number 1 then and check the barrel alignment. Remember, they were redrawn based on running times again after last night. Jim Knight, St. Walburg off 1. The 60-year-old veteran Stu Napper of Lashburn, Saskatchewan has got the 2 barrel, and Wayne Dagg of Melfort, Saskatchewan is off 3 for the Flames Fire Wagon. Harvey Lear driving for the Dennis McGilvery wagon. Crowfoot Ford
on his outside, Doug Irvine in along the rail, and then Ross Knight. It's going to be Rod Sullivan and the Hooters.
Joe seemed almost obsessed with the Hooters there a couple of times. Rod Solomon, good running time though, 1:60.
And here they come down the lane. That's Ron David on the rail. Brian Labucane's on his outside, and here they come, and they're going to duel it out all the way down the stretch. What a finish for Ronnie David. He's got a very slight lead as they head to the wire. Let's see. Can he hold it? Yes, he does. It's so close. It's too close to call.
Well, Ron David was just overtaken at the wire by Brian Labucane, who was 1:16 and 52, but nonetheless a great farewell run for Ronnie David. Nice clean trip around 1:16 and 57, and then Mark Sutherland and Roger Moore. Penalty-free second heat. You've seen a couple. The best time so far is that 1:16 and 52 for Brian Labucane. We take a break here. We'll be back with the third heat after this.
Chad, I know you were very emotional last night. How's the feeling back here at the barn today?
You know what? It was a tough morning. We had a couple stalls to fill, and I mean, it's a tough morning doing chores. But we got through it, and I mean, we had some good news at lunchtime here. A little after lunchtime, the post-mortem results come back on the left leader, Pablo, our young horse, and they had an aneurysm in him. And from what the vet tells me and the blood work that was done, there's nothing our barn crew could have did. There's nothing I could have done.
It's only available in the right
Calgary
channel.
Stampeders did everything to enforce new rules, and they were implemented perfectly. And everything is. It was a rare accident that happened last night. It was an aneurysm in a horse in his back end to make him go down, or to cause him to go down. And it's just like me driving a car down the street. I could have had an aneurysm yesterday going to the hotel or going over to McDonald's and run into somebody. But I didn't. It was an accident, and the chances of it happening are very, very slim, and it just happened to happen with a whole bunch of media attention.
I know what happened. Did this happen?
I don't know if people understand the relationship you guys have with the horses. I mean, I was back here doing the story with Katie, with yourself and stuff like that. I mean, these are not just things you throw out on the racetrack and whatever.
No, we spend hours and hours every day taking care of these horses, and it's our livelihood. I mean, I would never send a horse on the racetrack to hurt myself. It's my life. So why would I send a horse out there that I would think is in any pain or cannot run healthy? I mean, the Stampede does vet tests every day on all 6 horses that we run. They're pre-tested before we get here. They're tested again after. I mean, at the end of the day, the only sigh of relief we got out of this is the horse that did go down with the aneurysm is nothing we could do. Everybody did their precautionary methods. There's no fault of it, but we love these animals. I mean, it's a tough job coming here in the morning and seeing empty stuff from all across Alberta, some from Lloydminster, Saskatchewan. I mean, they come and help us. They all know horses. I mean, they all know them. It's a family. It's a big family.
Chad.
I want to take you back to last night. You're coming down. Did you know something was going on? Something wasn't right?
You know what? Everything looked good. Our turn wasn't bad. It was a decent average turn, and we got going out of the second corner.
4 Chuckwagon drivers will be running the Calgary Stampede track for the first time tonight. One of the rookies is Chance Vegan. The track is new for him as a driver, but he has been on it hundreds of times as an outrider, including one unforgettable ride.
Tyler Helming at 4, Kelly Sutherland at 3.
I remember it was heat 8 or 9, and they all came out of the barrels really fast. And I got behind Tyler Helming, and I took about 3 quick shots to the eye from dirt and rock. And so I put my head down, and before I knew it, I was running right into the back of Tyler Helming. And
there was a wreck in the first turn, and Tyler Helming got popped out of his wagon. And when he did, he took the lines with him too.
I was watching Tyler kind of bounce off the ground like a rock on water. And then I seen this wagon taking off, and I knew there was some action on the first turn, so I thought it was important that we get a hold of this outfit. And when I made it to the stove rack, I figured if I could get in, I'd have some better control anyways.
Goodness me, we haven't got a driver there.
Fucking bro.
He jumped in the wagon. I was like, oh no, here we go.
Fucking
by far and away probably one. It'll go down legend. I've never seen that kind of thing done before.
We went for it and we made it in somehow, and unfortunately,
Like he's Hawkeye. My bro.
Down to like the 3rd or 4th turn, and you're running out of time, and you got to make up your mind if you're gonna stick this one out. I got off and got out and got on the pole and just tried to walk it up to the lines, to the head.
But he walked up the pole and got on the wheeler, so that was, you don't see guys doing that every day.
Real King come and give me a hand after we got past the first turn. And
I jumped on the leader after that, jumped off my outriding horse so we could actually turn him too. And we weren't even riding for Tyler, we were riding for Kelly Sutherland.
Didn't have a lot of time to figure out what we were going to do, but we made it around everything. Tyler was all right in the end.
You know, I don't think he'll ever forget. I don't think the crowd will ever forget it. I don't think the people that watch and follow wagon racing will ever forget something like that. I mean, it's just an unbelievable event, and it took guts and it took a lot of talent to get it done.
Yeah.
I did it because it looked like it needed to be done, and it was the right thing to do. And
you know, and he's pretty proud of that moment. And, you know, us wagon people were kind of proud of that.
I'm gonna hold my head up high after that, and you take pride in being a cowboy and doing things like that in the moment that need to be done.
Fucking awesome, brother.
Pretty incredible story. Well, stay with us after the break. We will head back to the Stampede and update you on the storms that are rolling through the city right now. Stay with us.
It's day 2 at the Grand Prairie Stampede. Mark Sutherland flies through the first turn, but something goes horribly wrong.
We're going to pull them up right now and show you something very cool. Just like they did 100 years ago, we're going to show you the docking procedure. And we're going to turn down the music. I want everybody to be as quiet as you can, so you maybe can hear the driver give those horses cues as he shows you how they docked 100 years ago, maybe in St. Louis, Missouri, or Kansas City, or Chicago.
Oh shit.
Uh-oh, that's not supposed to happen. No.
Start right there, those 2 horses are talking right there. What? Right there. Ah. And them.
How they docked 100 years ago, maybe in St. Louis, Missouri, or Kansas City, or Chicago. Wait a minute.
Uh-oh, that's not supposed to happen.
Here comes the crew, here comes the team. Get them untangled. Hold on. Hold on. We've got professionals in
When you're working with animals, you never know what can happen. Now, I will tell you that there's about a dozen people that travel all over the world with this hitch. There's 3 hitches. They will travel 320 days a year. So everybody think positive, cross your fingers, cross your toes. The team that knows how to handle these big horses, working at it right now, they have the very best horsemen and women that take care of them all year long. We have watched them.
This guy right here fucked up everything. He's over panicked. He's not supposed to be there.
Notice the first thing they do is they calm the other horses. That gives them the opportunity to do what they need to do to loosen the harness, to totally free the one horse that is there.
He's trying to act like he knows what the fuck's going on, but he doesn't know what the fuck's going on, this little piece of shit here.
There are some giants. There is no doubt about that.
And they're like, what are you doing, buddy?
The lines laced through the fingers of his hands. He'll stay in position on that wagon, help control the other 7 horses. His shotgun driver, you can see he jumped off. He was the first on the scene. That's Andrew Lacrosse. And realistically, that's his job. Make sure everything is right. If anything at any time goes wrong, jump down there, jump into position, and get after it. So, trying to get him unhooked right now. Say a little prayer. I'm sure everything's going to be fine, but it never hurts to say a little prayer to have the good Lord look after our livestock. Randy mentioned it at the beginning of our performance. Our rodeo business is nothing without our animals, and we love them. I can promise you that.
I could be wrong. He looks like he's doing this shit.
Take their time, just like we do with our cowboys. We have the Justin Sports Medicine team for the contestants. We have veterinarians on duty all the time, 24/7. Whenever we're rodeoing, we've got them here and ready to take care of.
That's a lot of line, so, you know,
Saddle horse, rocking horse.
they're trying to trace it back to the origin, to where they can actually fucking steer these big bitches. Those are fucking Clydesdales. Those ain't fucking thoroughbreds, man. Those are fucking big monsters.
Harness work on these horses, you see all of that beautiful harness work, the lines, the tugs, the collars, all of that.
And look at that big bastard. He's still laying there. I think he's still breathing. But I thought he was dead.
What to take off.
He may be dead. Yeah, it looks like he's dead.
For allowing us the time to make sure that we're okay. Because the last thing we want is any undue injury, unnecessary, on that.
That horse is dead. Oh no, he twitched. He's still alive. He's traumatized out. So once I get all those lines off him, I'll bet you he'll jump up.
Not only cleaning and shining and making sure that everything looks beautiful as it does right now in front of us, but also get those horses hitched up, washed every day. Here's just a couple of interesting little things we have on our notes here. Usually we don't have time to talk about it, but it looks like today we do have an opportunity. Just something to think about. In 2 daily meals, these horses will consume 5 gallons of feed, 50 to 60 pounds of hay.
Really? He's dead?
Gallons of water each. Some big boys right there. So,
I'm gonna slap fucking Mr. P. Herman in the green and the fucking dick. He's actually dead.
Wheel horses, I think, are still totally attached to that wagon, along with the ones right in front of them.
Paging Mr. Herman. Mr. P. Herman.
Of that entire hitch and size. Once you get in to that first pair up front, the lead, and those right behind them, they're a little bit more athletic, they're a little bit lighter in weight, but every one of them provides a lot of power. pull that big old heavy wagon.
No.
So I think, I'm just guessing here.
Really? I know the horse was live.
So again, I say that they have lined that hitch back up. I think the wheel horses and ones in front are going to ease that wagon around just so it's out of harm's way and not going to be of any harm to that horse. Well, really, I've got to salute the ground crew. They were there so quick. And with all...
Hey, it's up, Blue Rock. What's up, brother?
Thank you for doing that for me. You know, when I tell you there's so much that's got to be done to get you and put all that together, you've got to reverse all of that, especially when you start with a middle horse like we had. So even our novice fans that are here watching for the very first time can identify.
Q, Mustang Cat, and Chevron. Folks, the most important part of the Chuckwagon race is picking one. Everybody in the audience has to pick a wagon they think's going to win. And then we expect to hear you cheer that wagon on. So how many of y'all want to see 93Q win?
That's good.
How many of y'all are cheering for Mustang Cat?
Mustang Sailing.
They're like the red, white, and blue is Chevron. All right, Bobby T, let's do the same thing.
All right. I think the audience is going to be the Chevron wagon.
Oh, he's caught up.
Uh-oh.
Turned it too hard.
That's called a simulated start.
That was called a oops.
Yeah, so what they're going to do, folks, is they'll come back around. They have to figure eight the barrels and then make 2 laps around the arena. The first wagon to cross the chalk line on the west side of NRG Stadium, on the floor, the first horse that crosses that chalk line will be the winning wagon.
All right, now you all called for a wagon a minute ago. Boyd and I are going to call them out. You cheer for your wagon. It's 93Q. Let's hear you.
Oh, 93Q with a big lead in the early going. Mustang Cat's got the inside track and they're using it. Chevron is the creamy filling in this Oreo cookie.
Oh, that 93Q's in trouble. Where the country music fans go to the inside. 93Q, 93Q.
Mustang Cat and Chevron. Mustang Cat on the outside.
Holy shit.
Uh-oh.
The hell happened there?
Nobody panic. First thing we got to do is capture that team of horses and make sure that on the outside.
Holy fuck.
Uh-oh.
He's got tossed out of his own wagon.
Mustang Cat on the outside.
Oh, leaned too fucking hard.
Uh-oh.
He was out after the third roll.
First thing we got to do is capture that team of horses and make sure that they don't come back to their driver. So we want to get those captured.
That's why you actually do it on a fucking track, not a, in the middle of a fucking arena.
Easy, easy, easy. Now, ladies.
So like,
You know, an opportunity to bring forth
can't believe my dad did
cowboys and
that.
girls of our era is a big part of the Calgary Stampede. And we'd like to introduce you to one of those very, very special people right now. A young man that was born in 1951 in Saskatchewan, raised on the Matador Ranch near Kyle, one of the biggest ranches in Canada. And its inception in 1905, the Matador Land and Cattle Company was 6 townships, 140,000 acres, and part of the Matador Holdings.
But that's somewhere in Fort Worth. And these fucking indoor chuckwagon races. (2018, 2016).
Well, Dickies is out in the lead as they head into the final round. But here comes Canada's on the inside. One more turn. Come on, everybody, help him, help him. And Canada.
Chuckwagon coming into that Wrangler barrel number 3. Pomeroy Lodging, up in the northern part of our country, is your first choice for professional lodging and hotel rooms. It is Top Traeger. Then we'll go to that number 3 barrel. Top Traeger, in his 3rd year of professional chuckwagon racing, honed his skills up in the Western Chuckwagon Association up north, where his dad and me kind of founded that association. Top Traeger on the 3 barrel. He'll be joined by veteran driver Chad Harden and the Sandy Hills Simmental and First Class Cattle Marketing Company. Their regular wholesale. Check them out online like we're on to the crew from Logan. I've got some of the best Simmental beef in the business. Chad Harden, former Calgary Stampede champ, goes to that number 2 Fortis Alberta barrel. And that's veteran Roy Romano on that number 1 barrel with Big Energy. There's a whore and the charge is underway as stones go in. Outriders now up and Chad Harden is shouting out Sandy Hills Simmental and First Class Cattle Marketing and Top Traeger in hot pursuit of Pomeroy Lodging. Barrels are up, outriders are all almost out, and we get into the saddle and he is gone. Into that second turn, it all belongs to Chad Harden, the former Calgary Stampede Chuckwagon champion, picking his spot along that rail with Top Traeger and Pomeroy Lodging in hot pursuit. He's got to make up some ground. Roy Romano with a shaky start and Big Energy. Back of our leader by about 3/4 of a furlong. That's how we roll between the final turns. Chad Harden, 22-year veteran, and now Top Traeger trying to close ground, but he's going to run out of racetrack. Headed for the home stretch drive. Finish and have it. It's your turn to come alive. You're about to cross the Iron Horse Energy finish line with Chad Harden opening the gap to 2.5 wide lengths over Top Traeger and Pomeroy Lodging. And over his halfway, Roy Romano. The newcomer to Medicine Hat, a veteran wagon driver up north in the Western Chuckwagon Association. He brings us Jack Bell and Clo, a leading ISO certified bell distributor. Derek Gately growing up in this sport as well. Big family of chuckwagon racers on that number 3 barrel. Moments ago, Evan McGee, Minuteman Press is on track. As Evan rolls to that number 1 barrel, growing up over the Canadian Pro Chuckwagon Association where he wants to get smaller. Evan McGee. There's a hole and they're off. A good start for Evan Sullivan and Hydro Dig. They quickly knock him into the back of that seat and they hit the flag. He gets out of Kelly Warren to the outside. KO's his bottom barrel. And Evan McGee and Press at the inside. But now Lighters in hot pursuit. And there they go. Into that second turn on and burn. Evan McGee's Minuteman Press with that rail advantage has overtaken Evan Sullivan with Hydro Dig as he digs into the backstretch run and Kelly Warren 3 wide to the outside, like to move to that rail. Outriders heads up. Here we go. Into that third turn. Evan McGee, Minuteman Press. He has got things happen. He is a rookie driver on our tour, but a veteran from the CPCA, and now that 9 1/4 lead will be challenged on the outside by Evan Sullivan and Hydro Dig. It's Evan and Evan. McGee and Sullivan. As they get to that Iron Horse Energy finish line, Evan McGee will take that. Press will get there. A length ahead Chance Flat, Aspen Crossing, railway excursions like no other, an award-winning destination. Southeast of Calgary, about an hour, the little town called Mossleigh. Chance Flat is a three-time outrunning champion of the world. He's joined by Dustin Gorst, a three-time outrunning champion of the CBCA. Century Downs Racetrack and Casino is home to our world finals. Third week of August, check us out online. Go to Century Downs Racetrack and Casino for the finals. There's a horde in there off. A quick start for Cruz Benchmiller, Alberta Massage and Spas. Approaching southbound now. Oh, there's Chance Flat in the barrel. Dustin Gorst in the barrel. I think I know where this is going. Chance Flat and Aspen Crossing is out in front of the pack. His two outriders that belong to him are just leaving town now. Ryan Speed Demons. Now look at this. Dustin Gorst and Century Downs Racetrack and Casino has got that backstretch lead by a horse length over Chance Flat and Aspen Crossing. Cruz Benchmiller cruising in behind the pack with Alberta Massage and Spa, gauging his speed with every stride. He likes to find room on that rail. He knows it's a quick run around that third and fourth turn. And we have got Dustin Gorst on a mission. Century Downs Racetrack and Casino rolls the dice, makes the gamble, and he's headed to the Iron Horse Energy finish line with company incoming. Here comes Cruz Benchmiller up the middle, too little, too late. Deep for a racetrack. Dustin Gorst and Chance Flat. Nose ahead of Cruz Benchmiller at the wire. Wow. Jason Glass, Birchcliff Energy, the two-time Medicine Hat Chuckwagon champion and four-time world champion, takes him to the number 3 Wrangler barrel, 10 to the aggregate, and he'll be joined by Lane McGillivray, a third-generation wagon man with Cascade Energy. They've got you covered with their state-of-the-art fleet of diversified units serving the energy industry. Lane McGillivray goes to that number 2 Fortis Alberta barrel, 8 in the aggregate, and Captain Kirk Sutherland here with Davis GMC. Running 2 wagons here this weekend.
It's my dad's bro, Kirk.
In this one, and the former world champ.
Let's go, Kirk. Bro number 1. Watch him turn and burn. Kirk's got 1. He's gonna fucking take it.
Kirk Sutherland is leading the pack with Davis GMC. Leaders in the industry. Kirk has the leaders on the racetrack. Midway down the backstretch now. 3/4 of the length ahead of Lane McGillivray and Cascade Energy. Now those checkerboards starting to make a move. Those big distance horses of the Glass family. Jason is rocking and rolling.
They're not gonna catch Kurt. He's fucking got it.
Captain Kirk Sutherland, Davis GMC.
Oh, number 2's coming up. Not gonna catch him now. Fucking got it. Let's see what they got on my bro.
Cody goes to the number 2 Fortis Alberta barrel, 12th in the aggregate, joined by the Purple Prince himself, Bert Nolan, because drilling and blasting, and then
For real? It's Teddy Ruck spinning shit on my fucking road. I believe you see some Sherman bear. This is the most nerve-wracking shit. When you get up to those barrels, you gotta fucking maintain. You gotta fucking pull back on those fuckers so they don't go full out. Because anytime they can just go fucking full out. And a good tip when if you gotta slow your horses down, you gotta crisscross them, make them work left and right, slow them down just to slow off their breath. But you don't want to do it too much. Imagine that, 16 horses fucking giving her for the finish line. Plus, you got 2 outriders each. They gotta be there at the same time as you. Every fucking second counts. It comes down to the fucking outrider. Your time. Holy fuck, look at that guy sneak in there, man.
As far back as I can remember, this is all I've wanted to do. I'm thoroughly convinced that a thoroughbred chuckwagon horse, a real good one, was born to do that. I have a really good left wheeler. We call him Zorba. He was terrible on the racetrack. He ran away with everyone. They couldn't hold him. They tried galloping him backwards. Finally, a guy phoned me and says, "You can have this horse, or he's going to the can today." So I said, "Oh, okay, we'll take him." So I paid $1,000 for him. He's not for sale. I don't care what you come with. He's not for sale. He's that good. And he was just born to do that. We'd have to steer him a little the odd time when the horn blows. That's about it. They sure become part of your being, because everything's energy, right? Good energy, bad energy. There's always energy. You know, and they can feel that good energy and they can feel the bad energy. Just what it is. The real stars of the sport are the 4 athletes who pull the wagon. It's not the wagon driver. The athletes of our sport are the outriders, the outriding horses, and the wagon horses.
From the days of the 1800s all across the prairie take 32 highly trained thoroughbred horses, 4 canvas-top chuck wagons, and 20 cowboys. Add a tricky figure-8 turn inside a postage stamp infield, mix in a good portion of teamwork, and hurl the whole kit and caboodle out onto and around a 5/8 mile racetrack, and you have a recipe for the most spectacular horse race on earth.
Cowboys still try to outdo each other like the way they've always done. But instead of over 15 miles, today it's half of one. Around an oval racetrack where big dollars are their prize. This modern sport is a race through hell where the history still survives. From the days of the 1800s all across the prairie lands, to the racetracks of the modern day, from Calgary to Cheyenne. Well, the Old West has sure come alive with the running of the wagon race, Chuckwagon evolution.
No one has worked with more wagon horses and watched more races than Chuckwagon matriarch Iris Glass. She knows what it takes to make a wagon man.
The first thing, you have to love a horse, and you have to know a horse. Be a good horseman. That is the first thing you have to be. And then you got to have lots of guts, if that's the word to say. And because it is a really rough sport, really. I guess it was late in '39 or something. He had a real bad accident. He upset his wagon and broke 16 bones in his body. My dad, so he quit then, and my brother took over, Jack, and he drove till 1945, I think it was. And then I married Ronnie, and on he drove for 46 years. Then Tommy started, and he's drove for 28. Now I got Jason, he's on his 3rd one, so into my 4th generation. For 70 years we've been going.
You old whore.
Their connection to the Chuckwagon goes back even further, back to the early ranching era, and to Iris's grandfather, John Doc Lauder, who followed the range Chuckwagon as a foreman of the huge Cochrane Ranch.
Cochrane? I'm in fucking Cochrane.
Doc, Tom, and Jack Lauder. Ronnie, Tom, and Jason Glass. That makes 5 generations of wagon men and their horses that have circled western racetracks or rumbled across the great western range. The first chuck wagons were adapted from surgeons' wagons used during the American Civil War. Texas drovers adapted the sturdy, wide-gauged wagon for use on trail drives. Emptied of bandages, surgical instruments, and medicine, the upright cupboard at the back was filled instead with cooking utensils, tin cups and plates, and the wagon's bed with enough staples to support a dozen men for months on the trail. The provisions...
Months on end.
Plenty of coffee beans for the grinder. There were thousands of gallons of coffee ground, brewed, and sipped from 1865 to 1884, when drovers trailed over 6 million head of longhorns up from Texas along the fabled Sedalia and Chisholm trails to markets in Kansas,
Chisholm?
or further north up the Western Trail to fatten on the rich hard grasses.
Who got Chisholm then?
A capable trail boss
I'll
didn't
kill him.
push his cattle. He normally let the herd
I'll kill him and kill him, Alberta.
along at a leisurely pace of 10 to 15 miles a day. The cat-hammed longhorns were supposed to gain weight on their way up north.
And you'd usually pick up and have an early breakfast and move till about 10 o'clock, and then you'd settle down and let the cattle rest and water, and usually move towards water and then they'd rest and fill up during the noon hour. Took about 4 hours during the day to fill them up, and then
You're goddamn lying,
move on again.
old cocksucker.
Riders spent most of the day in the saddle, as well as doing a 2-hour shift each night watching the herd. A 2,000-mile drive meant that men, horses, and longhorns could be on the trail for 4 to 5 months at a stretch. The cook was such a highly valued member of the crew, he earned a better wage than a top cowhand. After 16 to 18 hours in the saddle, in wind, sun, or rain, day after day after day, the men developed wolfish appetites. There was no dieting, no calorie cutting, no cholesterol counts. Just to maintain already lean bodies, the men had to devour 3 big meals a day.
The meals were just put together. It was mostly just your normal meal, your meat and potatoes and bread.
But the Chuckwagon
Meat and
was more
potatoes.
than just a place to eat and drink. A jacked-up hind wheel and a long rope made a perfect windlass to help pull bogged animals from flood-silted riverbeds. After a storm, men draped their damp shafts and slickers over the wagon pole to dry. And each night the cook angled the pole towards the North Star, so the trail crew had a compass point on clouded or misty mornings. In the 1870s, the Chuckwagon led cattle from the United States up onto the western Canadian rangelands. One of the first big herds trailed north was for the Bayou Ranch and its manager, Fred Stimson.
He made a deal with Lynch, who was a drover, to meet him in Helena, and they went to Lost River, Idaho, and they bought about 3,000 head of cattle for $19 a head and a bunch of horses.
Trail boss Tom Lynch hired a young black cowhand named John Ware for the drive north to Alberta. Lynch supplied Ware with a decrepit horse and a shoddy rig, suitable for the lowly job of nighthawk and cook's helper. When John Ware finally decided to ask for a little better saddle and a little worse horse, the whole crew knew the consequences. They gathered around the wagon to watch as a saddle was strapped onto the meanest, rankest bronc in the remuda. Ware knew what was up as well. Quick as a cat, he sprang into the saddle, but the bronc was airborne before he had time to set his stirrups. The lanky Ware just clamped his long legs tight around the horse's girth. His seat barely shifted as he rode the toughest outlaw in camp to a chest-heaving standstill. John Ware had not only got himself a better horse and saddle, but he had gained the lasting respect of the men who followed the Bayou wagon. As it had in the United
Bayou.
States, the Chuckwagon became an integral part of the big Canadian roundups every year. In late spring, the cattle were gathered and the new calves for each ranch were branded. In the fall, men, horses, and wagons were sent out to gather the grass-fat steers for market. These general roundups were well-organized affairs with large ranches supplying complete wagons and crews, while smaller outfits sent 1 or 2 riders as reps. There were no fences to separate the different herds, just one vast open range. The 1885 Canadian Spring Roundup involved close to 100 men, 500 horses, and over 20 wagons. The riders gathered 50,000 head of cattle off a range the size of Ireland. Pioneer rancher Fred Ings, a rep for his OH brand riding with the Bayou wagon, described the daily routine. When we were gathered together, the range boss would give us his orders for the day. He would allot portions of the country to different men who would work that part found back to a common center near the wagon. They were called circle rides, and usually 2 were made a day. After the second gather was accomplished, the men would prepare the fires and the ground to work the latest bunch of cattle.
As the Bar U cattle were the most numerous, they were cut out first from each day's drive, branded, and turned loose. And then another and another brand would be worked out until all the calves in that bunch had been gone over. As the country was covered, the wagons and the cattle moved gradually west, sometimes every day to a new site, but always with a thought to wood and water. There was enough demand for chuck wagons across North America that Studebaker designed a roundup model to sell through its catalog.
They were built short so they could maneuver and get around. It was pretty well weighted down, and they had to have a 4-horse team on it.
They had bedrolls wrapped in a canvas sheet about 12 feet long and 6 feet wide, and the blankets were inside, and when they moved the wagons, they folded the beds up and rolled them up and tied them with straps or a bed rope and threw them in the bed wagon.
When setting up a new campsite, the bed wagon was parked so that a large rope corral could be anchored to the wagon's hind wheel. A special wrap on the wheel and hub made it easy to tighten the single strand of rope that circled and contained over 100 horses.
The herders would run them into this corral, and they'd rope them out. They'd get up before dark, and the man that was roping the horses, he'd know the horse by the ears. That's about all you could see.
Each rider needed 5 or 6 horses in his own personal string. The younger, less experienced mounts were used for the morning circle rides. A horse with plenty of cow sense was chosen to do the cut, and a rope-savvy horse helped lasso calves to brand. Because spring roundups occurred during flood season, each man also had a favorite deep water horse, and no one wanted his mount to stumble and spook a herd of resting cattle, so each rider also had a sure-footed, reliable mount with which to share the lonely night shift. A young man's fancy might stray to romance, but a good-looking horse was never far from his mind either. In Log of a Cowboy, veteran drover Andy Adams stated, "On the trail, an affection springs up between a man and his mount which is almost human. Every privation which he endures, his horse endures with him." If the days were long for riders and their mounts, they were even longer for the chuckwagon cook. The pressure of early mornings and late nights was too much for a few of them. Their nicknames tell it all. Cooks like Dirty Dick, Old Poison Finley,
Dirty Dick,
or another fellow to avoid, known simply as Death on the Trail. But most were capable and respected men, and around the campfires of a big roundup, the exploits of a top
that looks like
cook
shit.
were much a topic of conversation as a fine roper or a great cutting horse. Open range cowboys all seemed to have a sweet tooth. They craved raisin pies and rice pudding variations like Spotted Dog.
Fuck you and your spotted dick.
Sourdough recipes were popular too, as well as being a necessity in country where yeast was hard to come by. On frosty spring or
I'm hard to.
a cautious cook might
Yeast was probably right fucking there in your fucking old Eddie spoon. Cha.
In Montana today, there are still batches of sourdough mix that can trace their lineage directly back to the 19th
Exactly.
century roundup camps.
Fucking horse.
Men were not out on the roundup. They ate in the cookhouse, but often still slept outside with the wagon, away from the bedbugs.
The men would come in with their loads of hay, and they'd throw off a bundle of hay to take into the bunkhouse. They'd put their tarpaulin over that with no beds. They'd sleep on this hay, and we raised the very best of bed bugs.
Cow critters had to deal with bugs too. Tiny mange mites burrowed under the skin, leaving infected cattle scabby or hairless. For a number of years around the turn of the century, an extra general roundup was instituted to gather all the northern range cattle and herd them through a mange dip, a 6-foot channel filled with a steaming hot potion of lime and sulfur. The foul-smelling mixture not only killed mange mites, but it tarnished metal buckles, buttons, and coins, and on at least one occasion, it tarnished a cook's temper. When Jack Morton came in late for supper, Roundup cook Louis Joe left the young cowhand with nothing to eat. Jack would have gone to bed hungry if another big man, John Ware, hadn't shared his plate. The next morning, breakfast was late because Louis Joe's pants were missing. That evening, the irate cook accidentally spilled hot coffee on Morton's lap. The affair could have continued to escalate, but Morton decided to postpone his revenge. It was after the boys had finished their final meal on the last day of dipping when Jack surveyed the cook. "You have us worried with all the itching and scratching you've been doing, Louis Joe. We figure you must have contracted a case of the mange." With these words, Morton wrapped his powerful arms around Louis Joe and carried the frantically struggling cook over to the mange dip, where he unceremoniously dumped him into a sulphurous channel littered with hair and debris from thousands of head of cattle. As the sputtering cook climbed out, Morton commented, "One dip should be enough to rid you of that itch." Mange mites and
Son of a
unhappy cooks
bitch.
were only a few of the problems ranchers had to face. By the turn of the century, railroad lines, irrigation ditches, and barbed wire fences were cutting the open range into smaller and smaller chunks. The fall of 1906 was especially hot and dry. Grass fires burned off sections of winter pasture and torched haystacks. The snow came early that winter, and it stayed, and temperatures dropped to record lows. Cattle, horses, and men suffered. Those ranchers who still had hay doled out what little they had, but it wasn't enough. Across western North America, open range ranches lost over 50% of their stock. Riding past the rotting corpses made the following spring's roundup a bitter affair. That gather of 1907 was the last general roundup in Canada. Young Westerners wanting to follow the Chuckwagon would now have to prove themselves in the race. Calgary Stampede creator Guy Wiedeck was dedicated to preserving a sense of the real West. It was in his home state of New York where Wiedeck demonstrated his first Chuckwagon race, along with a number of other Western events.
This guy had been involved with one of the first rodeos in New York at the Sheep's Head Arena. That was in 1916. And at that time, he brought together two Chuckwagons, and they performed a race there, complete to lighting the stove and doing all that kind of thing. So at that time, Guy saw that as a promotional thing. It was kind of a gimmick. It wasn't part of the true contest. But he also saw how the crowd loved it and how excited they were to see these actual activities that cowboys were doing.
In 1923, when Calgary organizers were looking for exciting new events for their new annual stampede, Wiedeck proposed a Chuckwagon race.
It was an idea that he was convinced was wonderful, but a lot of people weren't that convinced, particularly a lot of the ranchers who didn't want to use their perfectly good stock and Chuckwagons in something that sounded a little harebrained.
To test the driver's skill, each outfit was expected to make a figure-8 turn around 2 barrels. Then the wagon and crew were to race around the track, return to their start position, unhook, and set up camp. The first outfit to raise smoke won the race.
I think it was called a rangeland rumpus ruckus or something, some kind of alliterative name that really summed up what it was all about. It was a lot of fun. It was messy. The rules were raw. People made mistakes and people were crashing into each other. But the infectious excitement that really characterizes Chuckwagon races began right at that first stampede.
The 1923 races involved 2 heats of 3 wagons each. Each outfit was organized in a similar fashion to a range roundup crew. The winning wagon had outriders from various Mosquito Creek ranches, a driver from Streeters, and a wheel team supplied by Dan Riley, and a lead team from Cross's A7 Ranch. Guy Wiedig hadn't made many rules. Clem Gardner, who had the first night's fastest run of 3 minutes and 15 seconds, was disqualified for facing his wagon in the wrong direction. That small error cost Gardner the race and eventually the show. Mosquito Creek
What the fuck were you doing, guy?
Collected the first ever Chuckwagon trophy, a Stetson hat.
That 23 Stampede was one that was celebrating the pioneers of the Old West at that time. So it was very appropriate that they chose the Chuckwagon.
But Guy Wiedig wanted the wagons to be more than just an exhibition.
What he wanted to do with the Stampede and with the Chuckwagon race was make it a real contest. This wasn't a show anymore. He wanted a contest with honest cowboys out there performing.
You couldn't find a more honest, true-to-life cowboy than Clem Gardner. Skills learned riding the open range helped Gardner win the all-around championship at the very first 1912 Stampede. And he was the winner aboard Hightower of the Saddle Bronc Championship at Calgary's 1919 Victory Stampede. Always a tough competitor in the Chuckwagon races, Clem Gardner was one of the first to drive hot-blooded thoroughbred stock. Another man who had eaten many a meal off the back of a Chuckwagon, Jack Morton, also competed in the first Chuckwagon race. Morton was as rambunctious as the event itself. His favorite pets were a pair of badgers. Morton, alias Wild Horse Jack, was one of the biggest ranchers and farmers in Alberta, and stories of Jack's wild escapades were only matched by those of his humanity and generosity. The same fella who would hook up 4 unbroken broncs to drive at the Stampede, who was known to throw his driving lines aside and slap his half-wild wheelers with a slicker, was also known to gift a drought-stricken farmer not only with a team of horses, but the harness for them as well. Morton's generosity went so far as to have his ranch cook, Horace Inkster, and the CX crew make breakfast for all and sundry in downtown Calgary during the 1923 Stampede, the first ever Stampede pancake breakfast. Early Chuckwagon competitors were required to enter at least one other rodeo event. Jack Morton entered the Wild Horse Race and occasionally competed with another legend of Chuckwagon racing, Tom Lauder.
Dad started before I was born. He used to have a Democrat team. They called it a Democrat buggy with 4 wheels or something. They used to drive that all over the country. They had those kind of races. And then when Guy Wiedig decided to have this Calgary deal, he thought, oh boy, that's it. I'll have one of them Chuckwagons. So in he come. And he won Calgary here 3 times.
Because he was only assessed a 1-second penalty for the infraction, Tom Lauder set a track record that stood for years when he cranked his outfit directly onto the track without bothering to make the required figure-8 turn. The judges had to keep increasing the penalty for missing a barrel until it reached 10 seconds per offense. That's when the wily Lauder decided it was worthwhile completing the figure-8 turn. Tom Lauder wasn't the only one to stretch the rules. That second year of wagon racing, so many outfits doused kerosene on the wood or straw in their stoves that the rules had to be changed. In 1925, competitors were no longer required to make a camp and a fire. The first wagon across the finish line was declared the winner. For the young man who accomplished this feat, it was his first Stampede victory, but definitely not his last. The young man's name was Cosgrave, Dick Cosgrave, and his 1925 win was to be the first of 10 Calgary Stampede Championships. Cosgrave had been a pretty fair bronc rider, but it was in chuckwagon racing that he would excel. The sport became so much a part of his life that he used chuckwagons on his Christmas cards. It was largely due to Dick's attention to detail, knowing that a championship team was just that, a team, that made him so successful.
And old Dick was a top skinner, and he tended to put a top outfit together and could drive them, and the same with outriders. He had top outriders all the time, you know.
Penalties could be costly, so young men who were recognized for their ability were often asked to ride behind several different outfits. Orville Strandquist entered the Stampede's winner's circle 12 times as an outrider. But in the early days of this dangerous sport, the pickings were slim.
Yeah, you could feed yourself and go to the river to drink, because nobody got paid for outriding in them days.
Orville's first year of driving a chuckwagon didn't pay much better.
And the money wasn't too good that time. I think I got a 12th. I split 12th with Crowchild, so we each got $10. And folks at home, anybody said, "Did you get any money?" "Oh, sure." They never even asked me how much it was.
Streamlined horses were the name of the game, and drivers streamlined their wagons too, even going so far as to remove the wagon's namesake, the chuck box. The chuckwagon races have always been colorful, but especially so after drivers and their outriders were required to wear matching colored shirts. It meant a lot of quick changes for top outriders like Lark Isbell.
Because everybody had their own different colored shirt. We'd put on about 5 shirts, and then you'd rip them off as you come in off the track, and about halfway through you'd have to jerk on some more shirts. Put all 9 shirts on was just a little bit bulky and a little bit too hot.
Since the mid-1940s, it hasn't been difficult to tell which is the Glass wagon. The family's checkerboard tradition began the year Ron and Iris Glass were married. They were traveling from Hannah to Coronation in their 3-ton truck loaded with horses and equipment. An unruly wheeler had kicked the front of the wagon out in Hannah, so Ronnie was pleased when they noticed a dead-end sign lying by the side of the road.
Ronnie said, "Oh, look at there, there's a nice board, just fit the end gate." So I jumped out and threw it in, and we put it in, we got to Coronation, and I said, "Boy, that really looks nice, now I'm going to paint the rest like that."
The change in colors didn't hurt at all. The next year, Ron Glass won his first Calgary Stampede Championship, and when he won again in 1947 and 1949, Glass qualified as only the second driver after the legendary Dick Cosgrave to win the coveted Gas Company trophy. Several years later, he won the first and only wagon race in the snow, staged for then Princess, now Queen Elizabeth. But Ron Glass claimed he was really in the business of selling horses, not chuckwagon racing, much to the chagrin of his wife, Iris.
Oh boy, Ron used to buy a team and get 4 horses working, and oh, they'd be really good. He'd just go a whole year and just win, and then somebody'd like them, so he'd sell them. Oh, I used to get really upset with him.
Some of Glass's toughest competition came from the partners in the Buffalo Hills outfit, Hank Willard and Lloyd Nelson.
You gotta really drive in old days, and like Hank and me, we drove 10, 12 horses in the field since we were little guys, so driving was no big deal.
The use of whips had been banned in the late 40s, so drivers had to use less forceful techniques to encourage their horses to turn and run.
Hank and Lloyd were my idols when I was a kid because they was closest to me. I knew them, and they were champions, and they knew how to handle a horse and make it do what they wanted and make it want to do what they wanted without being unkind, and that makes you a horseman.
After their outfit was cut down in 1950, a devastated Nelson quit driving for a year, and Hank Willard took over the lines. Willard patched together a new outfit, came back to Calgary and won the 1951 show. In a sport where spectacular wrecks were common, Hank was a fearless competitor.
Old Hank was a character. He'd come out on that track and that wheel would be off the ground for 100 feet sometimes, just balancing. But he never weakened. He was pouring on all the time.
And Hank kept on winning until he racked up a phenomenal run of 5 consecutive Calgary Stampede championships. Sadly, Willard's streak ended the way it had started, with an accident. Hank lost his great lead team, Skeeter and Vino Tinto, on the road in a trucking accident.
He never married. He just was in love with his horses. I see when he lost his horses, he cried like some people do if they lost some part of their family.
It was appropriate that Willard's former partner, Lloyd Nelson, replace Hank on the winner's podium. Nelson would be the last man to win the Calgary Stampede, driving under his own name without support from a sponsor. Ranch names and brands had been on the canvases since racing began, but actual sponsorship started in 1941 when the Buckhorn Guest Ranch paid Marvin Flett to carry their canvas. A fine horseman, Marvin came close but never did win the Stampede. But his brother Dale made up for it by training 7 championship outfits. Dale Flett was a fierce competitor, even when riding a bronc with a wig for a movie camera.
When I was driving wagon or riding racehorses when I was a small kid, I always wanted to be first.
Flett took calculated risks on the track, but left nothing to chance with his equipment, and especially with his horses. Lloyd Nelson will never forget the time he tried Dale's outfit.
I've driven some real good outfits in my day, I think, but nothing like that outfit. They just work like a machine, every one of them.
Every horse is important, but a top outfit needs agile leaders up front to make a quick figure-8 turn around the barrels and capture the inside rail position. Dallas Dorchester grew up watching his father Tom's superb lead team of Blondie and Big Shot.
They're both 21 and 20 when they were done as on the Chuckwagon, and actually Blondie was a 3-year-old when he started, so she had quite a life. Never had a blemish on her. She's just a little horse, but she could turn and he could beat anybody out of the barrels with him.
Tom Dorchester believed that a race was won or lost in the first few seconds.
Okay, we're set here for Heat 2. Brasso Datsun on 1, Crossroads 2, Heckwell on 3, Burnmouth Sails of Thorsby on 4. The Stoves and 10 poles are all in there. Look at Tommy Dorchester getting off the 2-barrel, but he's not going to grab the rail. That goes to Ron David in the Brasso outfit.
Dorchester knew that a quick barrel turn often made the difference between being first or an also-ran. Wagon racing was Tom's life. He loved it, and so did his family. 2 sons, Gary and Dallas, and his son-in-law, Dave Lewis, went on to be champions. Tom's boys and many others got their start with Cliff Claggett's traveling rodeo show. Pete Mullaney remembers one of Claggett's caravans.
9 trucks going down the road, and the front one had a license plate on it. We traveled all down through the Maritimes, down through Toronto and Boston, down through that country, with only 1 license plate.
Traveling with Cliff Claggett exposed young men to the sport, but no amount of desire could replace the advantage of being born into a Chuckwagon family.
Once the kids grow up, they generally start out riding, and then they go on to driving, and you know, it's makes for a better.
It's horrible psychos.
Growing up in it.
Richard Cosgrave's grandfather was the legendary Dick Cosgrave. His father, champion driver Bobby.
God damn it, Dick.
The average drove was in Statler.
Fucking little peanut.
It was a benefit deal, and Dad had some out-riding horses hooked together, so he was hooked with Tommy Dorchester and Bob Barrett, I think it was, and we pulled in the barrels, and he said, "You want to drive?" I said, "Sure." So he jumped out, and Mom was in the bed, and she went wild. I was about 40 wagon lengths behind and ate a lot of dust. And
Ron Glass decided to give Richard some barreling lessons.
One of my first big outfits I drove for Ronnie out there practicing at his place. He said, "Get up there, kid, and drive him." So Tom, he got behind the seat and he was a little shaky. And Ronnie used to set the barrels really tough and then have a fence right there so they had to turn. So I went up and I went by the top barrel, I don't know, about 60 feet. And on the way back, and I cranked the bottom, and Tom's going, don't turn him, don't turn him. And old Ronnie said the kid's going to make a wagon driver, because I did turn him, and we were going 9-0.
Cosgrave, Glass, Willard, and Dorchester, each racing dynasty had a founder. And in 1969, a new dynasty began.
All I had was a crazy motherfucker named Terry Buffalo.
The arrival of Kelly Sutherland and the record. Although Kelly Sutherland represents the modern era of chuckwagon racing, he understands the old.
I mean, in those days, those old guys, they set the barrels tough because they had really good turning outfits, and you made one mistake and you ended up on your lid. I spent till I was about the age of 21, 22 being actually really scared. Partially because I was breaking an outfit, but partially because I didn't really know where I was going, and I had enough horsepower that I knew I was going to end up somewhere. It'd be nothing to see 2 to 3 wagons upset every chuckwagon meet we went to.
It's still half the pressure it used to be because the barrels are set so much softer. Like, they're way softer. If you can't drive around these now, you got some kind of trouble, you see.
Once a fine outrider, Norm Haynes is now the Calgary Stampede's head chuckwagon judge.
When we was in the old half-mile track, the barrels were set up so it was a lot sharper turns coming to the track. And now, as you'll know, we got number 1 set off a little bit, and 2, and then 3's almost coming straight onto the track, and the other one's on the track. So this has eliminated a lot of that wagon sliding and that coming to the racetrack. It's taken a lot of the danger out of it.
The old steel barrels and stoves had been dangerous, but the first night of racing on the new Calgary infield, Ron David discovered the value of a metal pole.
That was my first crack at that new Calgary track. It was July 4th, 1974, so I remember it well.
My first race in Calgary, Ronnie David's pole broke. To give you a little idea of what I mean by a pole breaking, it'll start to snake back and forth because it's out of control. It breaks off up by the neck yoke. And then when it digs in, the horses are still hooked to your double trees at the back, therefore bringing the wagon forward, driving it out through the bottom of the floor of the wagon box. And that's where the driver's at.
When the pole dug into the ground, the wagon stopped so fast that the stove rack actually broke off one corner and swung around to the back wheel.
And it drove him at least 30 feet in the air. And I was right beside him. And I was sure missing the farm that day when that happened. I thought, what am I doing out here? Look what's happening.
I hung onto the lines. I went as high as they'd let me go, and then I kept going. And of course,
Just Willer's dad.
Free of the wagon, they kept going, and I was spinning a lot. I can remember the track going away from me, and I remember the track coming back to me. And then when I hit, I was out, of course, then.
Ron David suffered a broken back and pelvis, a ruptured spleen, a half-dozen broken ribs, and a punctured lung. But he was walking with crutches within a month and back competing the following year. The new softer barrel turn, collapsible barrels, metal poles, flak jackets for outriders, and keen-eyed judges all contribute to safer racing. But one of the greatest dangers to men, and especially to horses, was overlooked until it contributed to the worst accident in the history of chuckwagon racing. The wreck began when a lead horse stumbled after stepping into the stove rack. 3 outriders were injured in the crash, but it was the fate of 3 horses that caused the greatest uproar, and rightly so. Something had to be done. The Calgary Stampede contacted head judge Norm Haynes and gave him full rein to design an enclosed stove rack.
You go ahead and get a wagon. We'll bring it in here, and we'll put our, we've got carpenters here. We'll tear it down and put it back together, and I think it was 5 times we tore that thing down and put that back up, and finally decided that that's the way it should be. So everyone is happy about that.
Along with a new stove rack came a light rubber stove that could be loaded with one hand and collapsed if run over by a horse or a wagon. Other than the size and the weight of the stove, the Outriders' tasks have changed little since the races began. It's still a 4-second penalty to leave the stove, one for each peg or the canvas fly left dragging. Veteran Outrider Jim Nevada explains the tasks, then shows us what it's like to follow a racing chuck wagon.
Stove man goes in first and pulls the stove out, and then he backs off so the peg men can come up and get their tarp straight out. Your pegs have to be on the ground or it's a second penalty. So the idea is for both of your peg men to throw at the same time so you don't get that back and forth action. It's an even throw and straight in.
Wow.
Outriders, horses, drivers, wagons. Come rain, come shine, dust or mud. Like the postman, the chuck wagons always deliver.
In '65, it started raining, and it never quit. And the track went from a heavy mud track to a soup track with a hard bottom, and the wagons picked up speed again. When I went to jump my horse at the top barrel, Orville Stanquist had already mounted his horse. He was riding with us. When Orville mounted his horse crowded over again me as I went to make my jump, and it pinned me between my horse and his. That's the way he took me out onto the track. I'd already rode the horse that I was riding in one heat, so he was muddy and I was certainly muddy. And when we hit the track, normally if you just drop your feet and hit the ground, the speed of a horse running will kick you into the saddle. But that year, with the track being so deep with the mud, when I dropped to kick into the saddle, instead of me kicking off the ground sucked me in. As I went down, my hands were jerked off the saddle horn, and I grabbed for the stirrup and missed it. And then sat down on the lead line. The horse I was riding was a horse called Tony, and he was a hard-mouthed old devil that liked to be with the wagon. So, being that way, me being on the end of that lead line just didn't mean a thing to Tony. He carried me right along for about 100 yards. I finally lost the last knot on the lead line and slid to a stop. I picked myself up. My legs were sore where old Tony had stepped on me a little bit. But I walked over to the inside fence at the grandstand and was going to lean against it, and there was a commissioner standing there, and he decided that maybe I should be on the inside of the fence instead of on the track side. So that's where I was, standing watching the wagons come home when the Sun reporter, Randy Hill, took a picture of me.
Oh, for the life of an outrider, but they do love it, and so do their horses.
I think the horses like it just as well as you do. You can drive a team out in the field or anywhere and set up a set of barrels and they're just on edge. They're just as much show-off as us cowboys are. They like it.
Ward Willard's great swing leaders certainly love to show off.
It was a big raised-faced horse that was bought for $350. Bought him off Ronnie Glass. And he was a barrel hunter. But he could turn a barrel so hard, his shoulder would be about that far off the ground. But yeah, he turned so short, the wheel team wouldn't be able to get around there. So I had this black wheel team on there that just about had the same brains God gave a sparrow. And they'd just charge, and they'd just whip that wagon around there. And I broke every track record at every major show there was that I went into.
Ward took Swing Leader and his mates all the way down to Cheyenne's famous frontier days. One evening near the end of the show, Ward's crew washed the wagon too late for even the hot Wyoming sun to dry it.
I pulled out to the
fuck.
And lined up. As I was pulling out there,
Fucking drink.
Saying to all these people down there, because I had been fortunate and had won down there the last 2 years, and I broke the track record a few times. He was really giving me too much credit, but he was screaming